Well, good morning. How are you, Tavis? You're back on terra firma here in the United States from your trip abroad to Mexico, right? No, you weren't on an island. You were in Mexico, correct?
I was in Mexico. I was in Cancun, one
The
of
all
the,
inclusive.
I believe, probably the, original hotspot for Mexico, I would think. Because
Acapulco.
we've heard it. Well, Acapulco was, but I don't think it's safe to go there anymore. You don't
Well,
hear
no, I'm
anything about
saying,
it
yeah, I think
anymore.
it was hot, way back. And then
Yeah.
Cancun, I think, took its spot. And then they're doing their best to kind of get in the news every once in a while and making people afraid to go there. So we've
Yeah,
been there
no,
several times,
it
but
was
now we
good.
go
I
to
mean,
Cabo.
Cancun is it's hotel on hotel on hotel, right? So it's
Hmm.
not the hotels aren't very big. The beach is beautiful, though. I will say that the beaches are gorgeous. I mean, we were
Yeah.
in Playa del Carmen last year, and we were at a nice resort, but they had like these barriers out in the water, I guess, for hurricane season,
Hmm.
and it was just these big giant concrete like pyramid looking things,
Hmm.
right in the ocean. So it wasn't like the pretty beach that you would expect to go to a resort in Mexico and like
Yeah.
go out and play in the water.
Yeah.
It wasn't pretty at all. So I mean, at least here it was. I mean, it was a beautiful beach.
Yeah. The beaches
Um,
there are great.
yeah, so
And I
that
always
was
love the
awesome.
tractor. The guy on the tractor, his job's every morning to go scrape
Rake
all
the
the
sand. Yeah,
seaweed that rolls up in the middle of the night. So you just assume it's always like that.
yeah.
I always think that's funny.
I mean, the weather was good. I mean, the nights it cooled off. Breezy, chilly. During the day, of course, it was warm, but uh, good times. I mean, that's the thing that the kids. Well, there was 12 of us total, and
Yeah. That's a
there
big
was
trip.
there were
It's a
several of
lot.
these several of the kids that got burned pretty bad, including Landon, who's naturally tan. Um, but just your body's not used to that
No.
exposure in the sun near to the equator, and no shade, and there's no shade in the pool, right? And you're in the
Yeah.
pool all day, so
The last couple times, so last time I went to Mexico was Cabo, and we were spoiled. We had a friend whose uncle had a house, and when he originally offered it to us a few years ago, we thought, yeah, that sounds neat, and we actually booked a resort. So I think it was 2 years ago we did that. Half of the time we went to this house, half the time we were at the resort. And while I was at the resort, speaking of the beach, Cabo beaches aren't as nice. And I was walking along the beach, and I stepped. It was buried about, I don't know, just under the sand, and I stepped on like one of those big old deep sea fishing lures, like a 4 or 5 inch
no,
lure
oh
that had been
gosh.
in the Mexican sand for who knows how long, and it buried in my foot. Like,
Oh
yeah, I'm sitting
no.
there, had to like yank it out, and then they brought over Mexican beach first aid guy, which was just top notch, I'm sure. And yeah, so I was worried my foot was going to fall off at some point. But it turns out the uncle's house is probably an $8 million house in this amazing neighborhood that I think it's 5 bedrooms with a pool and a view
Hmm.
that overlooks the ocean and a golf course. And they have a private house manager that'll come stock the fridge before you get there. It was amazing. So that was 2 years ago. So last year we actually just went to the house and it was
Yeah.
great. But he actually decided to sell it. That was kind of like the last hurrah. He said, hey, we're getting a little older. We're not going down there as much. We're selling the house. So if you guys want to go down there one more time, feel free. So we did, and it was amazing. So
Nice.
that'll spoil you right there on your what
Yeah, I
Mexico's
think I
like.
remember you. I think I remember seeing. You sent me pictures and stuff.
Yeah,
There, it was definitely beautiful.
yeah. No, that's great. So glad you're back. You closed a flip yesterday. Your 2 bedroom, kind of really quick flip. You closed it yesterday, and you've got another one going. I know you're real busy, so I know that this one you have going, that's the Conversation Pit house, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How's that coming
Yep.
along?
It's moved along. You know, these these projects. well, these projects, this particular project is kind of a heavier tier one. It's almost to a tier two because of the kind of just some of the changes that we're making. Um, but uh, it's really not. It's not difficult. It what it is just it's been the timing and it's been the timeline of moving trades around.
Mm.
And so I went over there yesterday after I got back, and just kind of frustrated because I wanted guys to work while I was gone, and they did, but not everybody followed the sequence. So,
Mm.
like I'm there yesterday videoing, for the electrician. Hey, you're gonna have to come back.
Yeah.
Like this and this and this and this and this. It needs to be addressed. And the AC guys made some changes, but they weren't obviously there when the electricians were there. So there's a few changes, but Saturday, the electricians were FaceTiming me. No, maybe it was Monday. They might have been there Monday, FaceTiming me, and felt pretty good about it. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, we got a system down. Do this. But now that I'm like physically there yesterday, I was like, crap.
Yeah.
Like I forgot to put this house wasn't designed with like a ceiling fan in the main family room.
Mm.
And so I noticed yesterday, I was like, crap, when I walked in with the electrician last week. I didn't even catch that. Now I caught it. Now I got to come back for that. There's
Yeah.
just several things. And the demo, one of the things about me, and we knew this with your properties, it drives me nuts when demo's not complete and we're
Mm-hmm.
like moving forward with several other things, right, that the trades
Yeah.
are doing. So I walk in and there's, here's the issue: that trades that need first off, the demo was supposed to be done last week for the AC guys and the electricians to do what they had to do. But I walk in and demo guys hadn't been there to do it, so that means that the AC guys just tore down sheetrock to do what they needed to do.
Mm.
So they didn't tear it down and then clean it up and put it in the garage. They just tear it down and leave it there.
Yeah.
And so you walk in and it's like there's just crap everywhere, all over the floor and stuff piled up. And,
Right.
it's just, it just looks messy and it's like unorganized. And I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay.
But they didn't do too much. Like, would it have been better for them just to wait and delay them doing their work until demo was
No,
done?
I
Or
mean, I'm glad they got it done because
yeah,
then it would have been like a phone call while I'm in Mexico to say, hey, we're
yeah,
here,
we're
but we
here.
can't work.
Right.
So at least they improvised and they made it work. It's just
Yeah.
that they just
Made
left
a
a mess.
mess.
And
Yeah.
so my call yesterday, the demo guy was like, "You got a mess to clean up."
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of cleaning to do, and then there's stuff left that has to be done that
But I
got
know when
missed.
your demo guy, he's really good, and
Yeah,
he's normally my demo guys had the sort of, hey, we'll just walk through the house once a week and pick up a few things that seem obvious. And like, and about 4 weeks in, there's still a curtain rod up in this room. There's some trim left in
right.
that room,
Yeah,
and
that kind of
yeah,
stuff drives me nuts. Like, I mean, I've walked it with my demo guy a couple times, and it's like following the sequence is what drives me
yeah,
nuts. Like, I would think that all the light fixtures and blinds and curtains and all that stuff comes off first. Like, it seems pretty obvious.
yeah,
But I mean, now we're taking out walls, we're opening up ceilings. The ceilings are open. Like, there's all this other stuff done, and you still have curtain rods up, and there's still
yeah,
fans up, and there's still lights up, and there's
yeah.
still like some of the baseboards left downstairs where all the baseboards are supposed to be removed. And so
Mm-hmm.
those are things you have to kind of catch as a GC or a project manager to say, like, hey, like this stuff needs to be cleared out of the way, get it out of here. Because when you
Yeah,
bring in the next set of trades, when I start bringing in my drywall guys, they think what's left for them is what's left for them.
yeah,
So if you leave a light fixture up, they're going to work around it. If you
yeah.
leave a fan, they're going to work around it. If you leave,
Or the
things
random
on the
old
wall.
doorbell enclosure in the hallway that everyone walks by, and then you realize you need to take it down, and then
Yeah, I
you've
mean,
already
like
painted
lots of
around
stuff
it.
like that. So you're
Yeah.
just kind of. I hate doubling back. Like I feel like the last two, the last two flips I ran were very, very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
We were like moving lightning fast on them. So
Yeah.
when you get into a little heavier project like this one,
Gonna
it
take a
didn't
minute.
necessarily have to go this heavy. I made some choices to see if I can get the bump out of it, because what it is there's some homes in the area. It's in a really good ISD. It's in Richardson ISD, even though it has a Garland address, and it's a unique home. You drive through the neighborhood. Now that I know the home, there's there's a bunch of them. I mean, you can drive around, but they haven't really sold. But it's a lot of house for the money,
Mm,
and it has the shoestrings to be able to pull it up and bring the value up,
mm.
even though I bought it with a very conservative ARV. And as I'm going through it, and of course, you know me, I love mid-century modern, and this is like a post mid-century influence property with the conversation pit.
Yeah.
So my thoughts are playing off of that now, and so like really trying to kind of play back into some elements that make it feel mid-century modern, that's been
Well, and it'll just
updated.
make it
And
feel different when people walk through, and it'll make it stand out in
yeah,
pictures.
I'm
It
trying
can't
to
hurt.
create some wow features. And like for instance, the kitchen had a 7-foot fur down in it for AC and other elements. And like the AC tubing that goes to the outside unit to the inside unit, was ran through the fur down. So
Hmm.
you've got to rework that, rework the Freon line and everything, get it into the outside cavity wall up high enough, above the 7-foot ledge and into the 8-foot plate. And so there's little things like that. You just have to kind of know what you're doing, to be able to accomplish it. But the end result's going to be amazing. And of course, I decided to go ahead and go new cabinets in the kitchen and the bar, and all of that's going to be awesome too.
Yeah.
So
Well, cool.
it's going to be cool. It's just working through the details and feeling like I'm making momentum in the right direction.
Sure.
And right now, I feel like there's, the plumbers did a lot of work, but they got to come back. They electrical guys did a lot of work, but they got to come back.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you
AC
enjoyed
guys
Mexico, and so
probably gonna come back. Yep,
if you wanted it to go
exactly.
completely smoothly, you would have had to like hire a guy just to sit over there or something. It's like, but at least your team is good and they each other, that where they can do 90, 80, 90% without you there. So that's a definitely something you built up over the years. So that's cool. You can kind of leave and still enjoy yourself, and no, don't have a complete mess when
Well,
you come
yeah, I mean,
back.
100% like that. I mean, we had a closing when I got back.
Yeah,
That's you would
it's
love to
always
have
nice.
that, right? Like the only reason we pushed the closing out was because I was gone. I was
Yeah.
physically gone, and I was out of the country, so signing paperwork and that element is much more difficult.
Yeah,
So
we tried to do that one time. I had a couple that was on their honeymoon in Canada, and we thought, oh, they'll just get a mobile notary. And that was just the biggest nightmare. So, yeah,
yeah,
just FYI, if you're ever going to be out of the country, it's not like going to Kansas City and getting to sit down in the lobby and, sign paperwork, which I've done on vacation and it's cool. But if you're out of the country, they have different rules and there's all sorts of stuff you have to do. So,
yeah,
yeah, we closed on the condo, the New Jersey couple who had the midterm rental that they were trying to buy. We finally closed on it. They actually walked away from their financing in the last week and decided to pay cash, cleaned everything up, and they're going to refinance into a DSCR loan as soon as they can. But yeah, they did really good. They came in, they had a bunch of stuff had been shipped there, and I had gone over with the permission of the agent and put it into the condo because it was just sitting on this doorstep. So by the time they got there from New Jersey, I mean, they had basically a two-bedroom condos worth of stuff from Amazon and Wayfair and Nebraska Furniture Mart just sitting there. So they worked really hard and got it going. So that was nice to have that closing. I'm going to take pictures for a friend today that's wanting to put his house up for rent. So, he's not going all out with marketing and all that. And he was cool with us just trying to do the best we could with pictures. So I'm taking the camera over there to do that. And then I have a listing that should go live today or maybe in the morning out in Princeton. So nice little bit of activity going on in my world because I'm full-time working entrepreneurial stuff now and it feels good. So let's talk a little bit about the market. Let's get a market update. So yesterday, the Fed met and they did talk about the rate situation. Of course, going into 2024, we've mentioned it several times. A lot of people predicted 4 or 5 rate cuts, and everyone was just sort of waiting on the sidelines thinking, oh my gosh, here's my time, here's my time. And it just has not played out like that. Inflation actually started to creep back up, and everyone's looking at each other. So the Fed met yesterday. The nice thing is that core inflation, which is evidently the inflationary number without food and gas factored in, uh, that is actually creeping down a little bit. The Fed did say they still plan on cutting rates at least one time by the end of the year and then multiple times in 2025. Doesn't really mean much because they've said that before. And I don't know that they have a huge grip on it, but everything has leveled out enough for a while to where maybe they are feeling comfortable with the direction of things. So it does seem like it's very possible that we will get at least a rate cut by the end of the year. And I think everyone will absolutely freak out and hopefully go grab up a bunch of the inventory that's out there. And speaking of inventory, in Dallas, year over year, we're actually about the same as where we were last year in this time. And so there, I think that it said there was around 11,000 sales last month. I think there's 36,000 houses for sale in the Dallas area on the Dallas MLS. The days on market is creeping down a little bit because we are hitting the summer months and there's just a lot of activity. People are out there, buying. The area that I'm selling out in Princeton, which is a pretty low cost, we're going to actually list for $269. The average day on market in that neighborhood is 25 days. And we're hopeful. We're not being just overly aggressive with pricing. The nice thing about those neighborhoods, where I think it was a Lennar neighborhood, and I think there's 3 or 4 houses that are exact comps, exact square footage, exact everything that we can look at that have either listed or sold in the last 6 months that we know pretty much what our house should sell for. So we're listing it for $269 and we are hopeful. So that's the market update. Why don't we talk about a little bit of news? So in the news, a few national things. Tavis, did you know that have we talked about this, that I lived in Malibu on and off for a little while?
No.
Well, this is for college. This is not on my. Yeah.
Mr. Ashton, Malibu.
Yeah. So
Malibu,
where I went to undergraduate, Pepperdine, is in Malibu. So my first 2 years on campus, my dorm, I had a view of Malibu Beach. I could see the ocean out of the window, and it was a good view. It was not some corner. It was like full window ocean view. It was great. First 2 years. Second 2 years, I was in an apartment on campus. We didn't have an ocean view, but it was right there. We spent time down at the beach. Looking back, I wish I would have spent more time down there, but we would go down on Sundays and play volleyball, and I had a great time. I mean, just beautiful, beautiful campus. But you're in Malibu. Malibu is actually 27 miles long and 1 mile wide at most parts. It's just this really, really long city all along the coast. All the houses are right there on the beach and on the coast. And it's not really much of a college town. So I think, we'd go to the Jack in the Box and a few little restaurants, but most of them that we couldn't really afford. And those stores were not really made for us. And so we would actually go to Santa Monica and Westwood, which is where UCLA is. That's where we would go feel like college students and go to bars and that sort of thing. So great time. But our friend Kanye West, evidently 2 years ago, bought a house in Malibu for $53 million. And it wasn't just any house. It was what's called an architectural gem by Architectural Digest and the New York Times. It's by a famous Japanese designer. It's mostly concrete. It's just this real modern, very modern looking concrete design. And it was $53 million. Well, Kanye's book on flipping may be different than the one you do, because what he did is he came in and evidently immediately had all the windows. This is on the beach. All the windows, doors, and interior ripped out. Then it's sitting on the beach and it's just this shell of concrete with no protection from the ocean. And I guess it just sat there. And now he's trying to sell it. And
I need to look this thing up.
Yeah, look it up, because now he's had to drop the price. I think he originally maybe listed it for like 59 or something. Now he's dropped it to 39. I think he's probably going to have to drop it for a significant amount of money.
He drops the price by 14 million.
Yeah, I mean, he was gonna. I don't even
now asking 39 million. This was back in April.
I don't even care how much money you have. The concept that you're going to go rip everything out and then just let it sit there and then try to sell it, that's just so bizarre. He's bizarre. I mean, let's not but I also don't think he's making all those decisions. He has people, he has management, he has money
Yeah.
managers, and the concept that any of them would
I mean,
let
there
them
is
just,
windows. There is a lot of windows looking out to the
it's a beautiful
ocean,
view. A
but
little windy right now, but it's a beautiful view.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just so weird, and I never went to any houses on Malibu Beach. We would drive by them, and they're actually very
It
unassuming
is
from the
just a
street.
concrete house.
Yeah,
Like it is all,
looks like 4 foot wall concrete, and this famous
yeah, like
designer did it.
the interior, everything's monochromatic.
Oh yeah, gray.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, from the street,
Oh
that house
gosh.
probably looks like one over in Richardson. They always look very unassuming from the street. You can usually
Hmm.
the garage, you can see the garage, and sometimes there's a gate, but you'll just see a garage. But then if you see the beach side of it, it's beautiful, because it drops down towards the beach, and it might be 2 or 3 levels. And um, it was fun living there. Who did I see? I saw, they always talked about Tom Hanks being down in town. I never saw Tom Hanks. I did see Pamela Anderson at the grocery store. She was at the grocery store once, and she was not in makeup and all that, and you would not have looked twice. If you didn't know who she was, you easily would have walked by her and not even glanced twice. She was just a very normal, almost less than normal looking woman in a grocery store. It was really odd, actually, because
Yeah.
you see her on TV and you're like, oh, it's Pamela Anderson. And then you like see her in real life. Like, that is really weird, actually.
You're like, wait, is that her? Yeah.
Yeah.
That,
And
isn't
then
that wild
yep,
how that
yep.
works?
And then I saw Dr. Dre driving on the PCH. It was traffic one time, and it pulled up, and there was a Ferrari, and it was a convertible, and it was Dr. Dre. So that was really cool. And I actually got to referee a basketball game with Adam Sandler and Rob Schneider. I work for the basketball team, and they came
Oh,
there for a
nice.
scrimmage. They scrimmaged the women's team once, and I was the referee. So super cool.
How
Yeah,
cool is that?
it was a fun experience going to school there and kind of getting those cool stories.
Yeah.
But so the other story, so two sort of local stories. The owner of the Dallas Stars, Tom Gallardi, he owns Sandman Hotels, and evidently he owns Denny's. I had no idea he owned Denny's, but he has not done any big projects in Texas as far as residential goes. But he's actually about to do a 39-story condo down in Austin, and it sounds like it's going to be really, really cool. But it's neat that this guy, he's from Canada. He owns a bunch of hotels, but he's kind of set up shop here in Dallas and now in Austin. And his hotels, he owns Moxie's, the restaurant, which is a nice restaurant, and then all the Sandman. And that's where he made all his money. So evidently plenty of money in hotels, and then he can buy the Dallas Stars hockey team. And now he's doing a 39-story condo that looks beautiful down in Austin. And more local and less expensive is Lennar. I read an article. Are you familiar with Crandall? Do you know where Crandall is?
Yes.
Okay, out by Forney, Kaufman County, east of Dallas. And I know a little bit about that area. I mean, I've read up a little bit on it, but what really caught my eye is, I've had a lot of investors that I've worked with trying to find, where's growth going to happen. I had this conversation last week with a friend I was at lunch with, and he was talking about South. Actually lives in Oak Cliff, and we were talking about Waxahachie and Red Oak, and
Hmm.
of course, going up towards Sherman, I'm real bullish on Sherman and that whole corridor of 75. But it's not, you can't mistake that out towards, Forney, Kaufman County is blowing up. And so this article that came out, the main guy at Lennar, they have plans to build 3,700 homes out I think in Kaufman County. And the quote that really caught my eye is he said, this is the main guy at Lennar. He said, the future growth is all this way. And so, one of the biggest builders in the country, and definitely one of the biggest builders in our area, has all these options for north and west and east and south. And he's out east, and he says all the growth is this way, which obviously it's not literal because there's growth a lot of places, but
Hmm.
it is interesting that he's saying like, this is the place. So I haven't really I actually did an open house out that way. I think it was in Forney, and I just was really unfamiliar with a lot, but I might go out there and just kind of drive around and explore a little bit, because it sounds like it's going to be booming for a long, long time. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been out there a whole lot.
A little bit. I mean, it passed through it a little bit. That, and it's just basically continuing east past, Mesquite, right? So,
Yep.
um,
Is that 20 that goes out that way? Is that I? Is that
20 and 80. Yeah.
okay? Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a different part of town.
the benefit is that there is multiple. You've got 635 kind of looping north and south. Then you have George Bush that's dumping out onto 30 that's going to continue to 20.
Hmm.
And then you have, 20 and 80 running out east. So I think from highway aspects, there's some good options there. And then, you go further south, you've got, I-75, 175 that goes out towards, uh, I think that goes through the bottom side of Kaufman and into out towards Kemp and Cedar Creek and continues
Mm.
on to Athens. So
You know
you,
what would
you kind
actually
of have
really
like a lot of those roads that kind of seem to move pretty good. I mean, 635 gets bottleneck, but
well living out
I could
there.
see it.
To me, one of the downsides is access to the airports. I mean, because
Yeah,
you're a
yeah,
ways from Love Field or DFW. So if they made an airport out east somewhere, that could make a huge difference to me out
yeah,
in that area. I mean, I know that's a big deal. You can't just throw up an airport, and I'm sure a lot of the different businesses sort of throw up a stink whenever there's a new airport. But if they had some sort of airport out east, and that then
hmm
those people that wouldn't have to drive over an hour probably to get to
yeah,
DFW, I mean that would be a pretty big deal. And I could kind of see if it keeps more and more people going out that way. I wouldn't think that would be an impossible thing. So I'll do some research on whether or not they've ever considered a third airport in the DFW
yeah,
area and where that might be. I guess I know McKinney has a decent private airport, and I'm sure
yeah.
there's a private one out there, but
Terrell has one too.
yeah,
So I mean, that would probably be where they end up doing it
yeah,
if they did it, But I would think that it would have to be a lot more growth. And the
yeah,
other issue, when you think about it, is what's the workforce behind it, right?
hmm,
So I can't think off the top of my head what's what's pushing people. Like for instance, Sherman Denison, you've got a lot of jobs going up that way,
yeah,
right? You've got TI, you've got, a lot of these, a couple other big companies moving up there. And so that carries growth,
yeah,
but when you think about it, who's the big companies moving out towards, Kaufman and Crandall and stuff like that? There is a lot of manufacturing plants out that direction,
yeah.
you know.
Delivery,
I know there's a lot that's in Mesquite, a lot of transport and a lot of
hmm,
logistics and stuff that catch that loop on 635, and they can go
yeah.
down to 20, and they can go east or west out of town. They can go to Austin, So there's a lot of mobility there. But
Well, and it's just affordable,
um,
and even if you just work at a normal job in Dallas, but you need a house that costs $280,000
yeah,
to start with, that's where you're going to go. And maybe that means you have to drive 40 minutes to get to work, but
yeah,
you can do it, and it's not necessarily on a tollway. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like maybe it's just a continuation of what Garland and Mesquite were in the
yeah,
60s, and now it's out that way. And after that, those houses will become too expensive, and we'll be driving to Terrell to get
hmm
an affordable house at some point. So, all right, let's
even
talk a little
Terrell's getting
bit.
expensive. So
Now, Terrell
it's
advertises all the time on the radio. I mean, whoever the Terrell Economic Division or something, they advertise constantly. I've never known a town to spend so much money trying to convince people to come. It's weird. I mean, they're all over the ticket. I mean, they spend good money convincing people how great Terrell is, and I just think
oh
it's
wow,
it's kind of
yeah,
funny. But maybe it works. I don't know. I have not been super tempted to go check out what all of what Terrell has to offer, but
hmm
evidently some people have, and they're spending their tax money on radio ads. So let's talk about some real estate news that is more real estate nuts and bolts. We always try to get deep dive a little bit of the real estate industry, specifically investment, the investment world, towards the end of our conversation here. So a few big things are happening. Of course, we've talked about the shift with real estate agents, and that's taking place. I haven't noticed just this huge change in how we're doing things. It may get that way sooner than later. They say at one point they said July was going to be some date that was going to be important as far as when they're going to start actually taking the commission off of the MLS. I just did this listing here, and they're still asking for what your commission is for the buyer. So it's still on our MLS. So I guess maybe when that changes, some of the public sentiment might change. So we'll see, but we've been tracking that. Well, there's a couple things that hit closer to home with investors. Let's talk about the LA story. So LA has passed a law that is going to require that if you flip a house, you have got to disclose which contractors you used, and you have to pass that information along to whoever buys your house. So that's definitely not a law here. However, in practice, that I know that's something that you do, Tavis. So why don't you talk about, let's say that you were a flipper in LA, or maybe this rule comes to Texas. How would that change how you do business or other people do business? Do you think this is a positive thing, or it's kind of a thing that will throw a kink in things? It has unintended consequences after they set that rule in place.
So I think I'm a big fan of disclosure, right? I think the more that you disclose, the better, and the better you are, just to lay the facts out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I just sold this house here, and that we closed yesterday, one of the documents I make them sign, even though it was a broker buyer that was buying the property, but one of the documents I make them sign is a remodel disclosure statement. And it basically says you're buying a property that's been remodeled. There's going to be things that the current owner may or may not know about the property because we never lived in it. But we've remodeled it to the best of our knowledge. And basically, you should hire an inspector, and you should get things checked out, and you should do your due diligence, right? So that's a document that I had an attorney draw up that kind of basically is an additional disclosure that's stating, these are the things that you're buying. And then we do a final walkthrough agreement that basically says, hey, you need to walk through the home, or you did walk through the home, and did you get an inspector, or did you not get an inspector? And basically, based on what we agreed upon, you've walked the home before you closed on it, and you sign that paper, just basically saying you've walked it and you had the chance to inspect it and you accept it. I think, my concern with fully disclosing, like who your contractor was, the issue that you run into is most contractors are typically going to only warranted their work for like a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Labor and the material. Sometimes you're going to have material that's going to be specific to a manufacturer warranty, appliances, AC units, things like that. The issue you run into is where to draw the line specifically when you sell the property. Like how does that new buyer know specifically what that electrician did? If that electrician just changed out some lights and fans and updated a couple outlets, but then you have an issue with an old circuit or something that was originally done incorrectly, and you have a problem with that.
And
It's
they didn't
hard to
touch
hold
it.
them accountable.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a lot of issues that get pushed back on that because there's only so much that you can kind of warrant. So like when I sell a property, that's a remodel, I'm not warranting anything. Mind you, if it's something that, is a manufacturer default or something that somebody reaches out to me, I might be able to say, hey, here's the vendor, or, here's the information. But it's kind of hard to like leave this projected warranty, right? Even in a new build, if I built the home from the ground up and we sell it, that's why there's those 210 warranties in place.
Yeah.
And basically what a 210 is, basically a 10-year structural and, 2 years kind of labor typically.
Like, yeah,
right?
there's usually like a one where it's like everything kind of, they'll come in.
Yeah. Like 1 year is typically bumper to bumper. Like,
yeah. And then
if something breaks, yeah.
Yeah.
And then 2 years would cover like, imperfections on labor or something like that, right?
Mm.
And then you have the 10-year structural.
Structural
Um,
mechanical, yeah.
and even in that case, a lot of times that kicks out to like a third party. You
Yeah.
know, it wouldn't necessarily even come back to the original contractor to do the work or fix the work. Sometimes, if they kick it off to a third party warranty company, it kind of works like how a home warranty does, where you pay, in that case, a home warranty, you pay a small copay, but it might be some random, third party vendor that's coming out to, repair your dishwasher if
Well,
your
I think,
dishwasher fails.
in I'm not an attorney, but I think you would have a real hard time. I mean, let's just play it out. And you have a homeowner that buys a house from a flipper, and then let's say a month later, 3 months later, they say, "Hey, this isn't working." They go back to the flipper and they say, "Well, you used so and so." To me, I feel like there's so many parts in between where the guy had the electrician out and then the homeowner's there, that who's going to be
Mm-hmm.
held responsible? Because how do we know how the homeowner treated the house since they lived there and they didn't do
100%.
something? And then they had an
Yeah.
inspector, they bought it quote unquote as is. And so then so is it the inspector's fault for not catching something? Is it not, they had an option period, so they could have walked through and hired, is it their fault that they didn't hire more specialists to come through? And I mean, I would think that unless you're misrepresenting what it is and you're saying, "Hey, we did X, Y, and Z, and here's the receipts," and then they go back in and like you said, you need to put a new panel in, and this is not a new panel, like stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that, I think would be easy. But if you're talking about, well, I mean, a good example is this. When I sold the last flip on Mapleton, about 6 months later, the agent texted and said, "Hey, who did you use for your AC, or did they replace this?" I can't remember the specific question, but basically their AC was going out.
Mm-hmm.
And when we sold them, it was working. And the inspector checked it, and we actually had it serviced. We had receipts for it being serviced before we sold it. We didn't sell it as new. We didn't represent it as being brand new. It was just part of the house when we bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess they could have come back and, wanted some, but it's like, well, how do I know you didn't, run it at 65 for the last 6 months
Yeah, or
with
you
dirty
didn't, you
filters
didn't,
or like,
yeah, you didn't change the filters out,
yeah.
or
So,
you've been running it when it's, below the temperature and running it nonstop,
yeah,
like, I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of different things that,
I
and that's
mean,
where it's loose. I mean, I get the concept. I
yeah,
get the
protection of
concept
the buyer.
of disclosing and, providing information, especially, there's a lot of terrible flippers, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that just literally lipstick a pig and they don't care about what goes on behind the walls, and they, just do the bare minimum to maximize every dollar and every profit, instead of having licensed trades kind of come in and evaluate if there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this, uh, previously, like this property I just sold yesterday. One of the things that we did was I had my professional HVAC guys over there, and they checked out the system, and it wasn't a new system, but they checked it, and one of the things they found was that the AC ducts were falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spent the money to change them out.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, let the inspector, and in this case, these buyers actually didn't hire an inspector, because he was a broker, and for whatever reason, he did his own self inspection. And so, like, I mean, we disclose what we know, we disclose the information that we did, but I mean, that could have been easily missed, right? If the buyer didn't do their own inspection and they didn't hire a truck inspector that knows to kind of look for some of these other things, then I may be getting a phone call down the road because they missed it,
Yeah.
which you don't want that, right? You really don't want that phone call, even though
Right.
technically it's on them. And I had them sign a document, and they had a chance to inspect it, and
Yeah.
they had a chance to do these things. But that's also just me, because I've been doing this a long time and I've learned as I go. And I've definitely had phone calls down the road that I didn't want, that were, things that we had to make a hard decision or get an attorney's opinion on to say, do we accept fault on
Yeah.
this or do we not? Because where do we point the finger? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this problem could have been pre-existing. We had no clue, it
Mm-hmm.
never broke on us. Like in your case, you had a decent AC system. Everything was working great. everything was tested. You did have a licensed inspector come out and check it. Everything was good. And then it breaks, things break.
Mm-hmm.
And even a new system they break, but they're typically, have a warranty.
Right.
And
Well, and they
that's the
could have bought a
difference
house
is
warranty. They could have asked for one in the sale. They could have purchased one.
exactly.
There's
Well,
just a lot of things.
even if they don't get you as the seller to pay for a home warranty, they have the option to pay for it.
Exactly.
So a lot of people don't understand that, but like they're in our contract, there's an option and they're asked the seller to pay for it. But at the end of the day, it's up to the buyer to get it. All it is I say ask for the seller to pay for it. Technically, the seller doesn't pay for it. The seller doesn't choose it. The seller doesn't physically pay for that warranty. All it is a credit on behalf of that section, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're giving a credit for $750 and they get a policy that's $1,000, then they pay the difference.
Yeah.
And they order the policy they want. So I think it's it's one of those weird things because it's like the more that you expose all your contractors. Like for instance, when I sell a home, and typically I do this for the appraiser just to outline everything that we did, and I give them full disclosure, full spreadsheet of everything that we did. If the buyer asks for it, sometimes I'll give them the same documentation or support what we did, but I'm not going to go through a list and give them all my trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end of the day, the company that owns the entity, Westbrook Renovations, is a GC.
Yeah.
And therefore we, are facilitating and using licensed trades and subs to
Right.
do the work.
Yeah. Them
But I'm not
calling
going to go through.
Carlos 2 years later and saying, "Hey, this drain seems to suck," So
Yeah, I mean, and I think it ultimately is just important to, as buyer's agents, as professionals in this business, is to encourage your people to do the right due diligence and the right amount of inspections up front, right? I just think it's very important. It's not like, in the housing industry, we don't have that 3-day right of rescission like you do in the retail world or the car industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when you sign on that dotted line and you close on the property, you've had plenty of time to do your due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
You're signing that you're buying the property as is.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is very black and white, but I do think it's just important to disclose. I think it's important to show what you know. And, there's so many people still that have the mentality that if they renovated a property, when they get to the seller's disclosure, they basically leave it blank. And their claim is, I never lived in the home.
Yeah, it's so annoying.
Yeah, it's like you never lived in it, and it asks you, have you lived in it or have you ever occupied it? But it also asks you all these different questions specifically to things that you should know.
Right.
Do you have an AC system? Do you have a water heater? Did you have any
Unknown.
problems? Did you have foundation problems? Like you're going to know what you know from the time that you own the property and you spent money to renovate it. So
they're just trying to do everything they can to wash their hands of it. So,
and those are the things that end up in a lawsuit. Like those are the ones, that is the situation, because the argument will come back and say, hey, you said in your marketing that you spent $50,000. So you spent $50,000 on what? Did any of that include electrical? Did any of that include plumbing? Did any of that include roof? Well,
I'm sure they put it in their description because they want to draw attention to how awesome it is. And then
but
it's
then
like
your seller's disclosure is blank.
Yeah. Well, so this brings us to our point. There's bad actors, and bad actors get everyone else in trouble. And I mean, at the end of the day, we want people to be protected and have a good product, and that's how you run your business. That's how I definitely try to run my business. And I know all of the people and that we've had on here run really good businesses, but there's a lot of people out there who try to be shady and that sort of thing. And so they make rules, which brings us to our next point. So we've got a few minutes here. Let's talk, and we're going to talk more about this because I think this is a bigger issue. But South Carolina is passing a law, and evidently it's maybe already enacted, that is, for all intents and purposes, making wholesaling illegal. You wholesale. I've wholesaled a house. A lot of people we know wholesale is a huge business. It's definitely a huge business for a lot of gurus out there teaching people how to get into the real estate business, trying to figure out how to do it without no money. Because wholesaling a lot of times is your first you can try to wholesale, because really there's no licensing. You can go in the state of Texas, at least, you can go put a house under contract and you don't have to have a license, and you can have an option period that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks long, if that's what the seller agrees on. And then you can go market that property to whoever you want to. And if you get it under contract for 200 and you want to go market it out there for 240, and you say, hey, it's a great investment property and it can do this, this, and this, and if you rehab it, it's worth 500 and blah, 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 and you get someone to sign on the dotted line for 240, well, you just made 40 grand as a wholesaler. And we've talked about it. You can do it in assignment, or you can do a double close. There's ways to transfer that. But at the end of the day, you're putting something on a contract. You're marketing it to other people who are the end buyer that are actually going to flip the house or buy the house and live in it or whatever. And if you, whatever you make in the middle, that's your spread. That's your wholesaler's fee. Well, South Carolina, in an attempt to protect sellers, because they had several complaints from, evidently kind of the little old lady that had no idea what was going on. Someone knocks on her door. Hey, I want to buy your house. She said, okay. She didn't know it was being sold somewhere else. And then this guy in the middle is making a ton of money and she's not making as much. And so they feel bad for it. So like, all right, we got to fix this. And so they basically made it to where you had to be licensed to do it in the first place. But even if you're licensed, you can't market a house that you don't own. And so until you actually close on the house and it's yours as an entity, you can't market it. So it really takes away the whole idea of wholesaling. The attorney, Tavis and I both listened to this interview, is on the Market, the economic podcast for bigger pockets. Really good interview. An attorney out of South Carolina. He's on the real estate board there, and explains it really, really well. Well, in his opinion, this is going to happen in a lot of different states, if not all the states, where they're going to start regulating wholesaling. So let's talk briefly about how you think that might affect things here in Texas and how that would affect your business. And if that happened tomorrow, how do you think you would go about running your business?
Well, wholesaling's already started to shift, just based on, supply and demand. And I think, uh, rates and the demand on the backside, and, I think it got really popular over the last, 5 years when rates were low, and there were so many people that got into the flipping space, and people were buying high, waiting on the bump in the market because things were accelerating so rapidly, and you were seeing 10%, year over year increases in values. And so I think, I had a good run, with stuff that we were selling. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I was kind of looking at flipping versus wholesaling it out. And based on where I was able to buy it for, there was a demand of other investors that were willing to pay more. And so a lot of cases it was, the decision was made out of convenience for me in that factor, right? Like, oh, I can sell it and make a yield versus, going through and doing all of this renovation. I still bought it with enough meat on the bone that I wanted the end user to make money too. I'm a big believer in that, but I think, I've already kind of shifted my personal business to be more into the bird in the hand. I've got to flip it again, instead of trying to look for that wholesaler. And I'm seeing it now. Like you're seeing it with the competition out there of people really trying to just make deals stick or trying to wholesale it, and they just don't have the background of the renovation to know what things cost or to have a realistic idea of ARV. But I think it's definitely going to change things up. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it lays out. I think that it's just like the real estate industry, where we've had this whole controversy lawsuit that's caused a hiccup in how buyers agents, will get paid in the future. I think it's the same kind of misunderstanding. I think it's, people that feel threatened or feel like a certain way. You get, a handful of people in the industry that, you get licensed agents that get their feelings hurt if somebody like me or you puts a deal on their contract and maybe they were trying to get the listing, and we're able to wholesale it and make, 10 grand, 15 grand, and wholesale it to another investor that we trust and we know is going to perform and close, and it's still convenience for the seller. And you get an agent that gets their feelings hurt because they feel like they could have made a commission, And you have that, and that was one of the things that the guy talked about, that attorney talked about, is like agents getting upset, feeling like they're being left out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which at the end of the day, I say this all the time. The difference is that when a agent puts a property up for sale, for the most part, they don't have that potential buyer in their back pocket. They have a marketing plan, and their
Mm-hmm.
marketing plan is based off of statistics and based off maybe their history, of what they've seen go on in the market, and depending on their strategy of what they may do. But it's basically like, hey, we have a strategy on a way to achieve your goal here, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, but we don't have a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know for sure it's going to do this. And there could be major price reductions in order to achieve this goal. And there's unknowns when it comes to a traditional buyer and doing inspection periods and financial options and all these different things that leave a lot of unknowns to this marketing strategy, versus somebody like myself or you that's coming in knowing that we have a network of other you know senior investors that are looking for an opportunity, that can perform, that can close, that can buy it as is, and make a decision quickly and not drag this thing out through all these different option periods. Then we know that when we go on a contract for a number, that we feel confident in being able to bring in another buyer, right, that end buyer, to be able to perform and close, and everybody's happy. And therefore, we'll make a yield on either an assignment or a double close, depending on the situation, right? And you're creating a solution to a problem. And the problem is the seller wants convenience, and the seller wants to sell it as is. And you're able to do that. In a hypothetical, in the way that wholesaling should work. That's the idea. That's the concept that I have when I look at wholesaling a deal. And I may wholesale a deal because the property's in Fort Worth. I looked at one last week we were trying to get done. We had an agreement, we had a verbal agreement. They put it to the attorneys. We sent over the contract. We basically had the whole thing kind of set up, and then basically the sellers got greedy. They came back, and after they had agreed to our number, then the sellers came back and wanted another 15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, them wanting another 15,000 took away our spread. So, them taking away our yield, our spread, we're like, sorry, we're out, right? Like, there's no reason for us to continue if they found a solution that didn't include us. There's no reason to kind of drag this thing out,
Mm-hmm.
right? And or try to go to their number and then push it higher when we didn't feel confident with the numbers. So I think it's just being aware of that kind of situation, and know it as a professional. And what has happened is that this business has brought in all kinds of inexperienced people, all this advertising that's out there, all the guru stuff, make money with no money, go out and anybody can be a wholesaler. You don't have to have a license, you can do this. You just have to find a deal. And we've seen it, and you
Yeah.
see, we get the emails every single day. We get these opportunities every single day of things that we see go out there. And
Well, not just
it's
the
just,
emails, but I'm on a lot of those groups of wholesalers, and you can just tell, and everyone has to start somewhere, but so many of them have really random questions about how this should work. Or like I saw one yesterday. Hey, people in DFW, this is a national one. Hey, people in
mm-hmm,
DFW, what's the average price per square foot right now? And you're like,
mm,
what does that even mean? Like where DFW is huge, 8 million people. There's tons
yeah,
of different towns, tons of different levels of houses. I mean, but that's the type of, hey, what's the like they're trying to comp something.
mm-hmm,
They think they have something. They think they have somebody, and they're trying to throw out a number to them, and they're just going to base it off of what people in some chat group say is the average price per square foot in DFW. So,
mm-hmm,
I mean, you have that level of, you know, ignorance or uneducated in the market, but that person is just as capable of cold calling enough people and getting someone on the phone who's desperate to say, yeah, I'm interested. And if they're like, hey, I think I could get you 210, does that sound good? And then they're scrambling to like go perform on that. So I think that some regulation is probably good, and if it, I'm all for making it be, you have to have a real estate license, have some sort of training, have something like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
It's a large transaction. And if all they're going after is, consumer protection and all that sort of thing. Now, the thing that's going to bite them in the butt is on the back end is it probably will not make houses any cheaper for the end buyer, because if you're having to double close and pay a bank extra fees and a lawyer and a title company extra fees to close and then do it again and maybe hold it an extra couple months while you're like, it's going to make the backside, I think, a little bit more expensive. But, when I read that or heard that interview, I thought, well, this actually goes into what you're talking about. I think you just become more of a flipper, like, hey, let's come up with a company where we are the end buyer, and we can go in and get deals locked up at a price where we can at least, maybe do a hotel type thing, clean it up, put a little bit of paint, new carpet, put it back out on the market, and even just get your real estate fee out of it. And you're good to go, move on. So I think people will adapt to it. And I think a little bit of regulation is probably good for the industry, because it's just the Wild West. And like you said, you got a lot of weirdos, but I don't know.
You think about it, and the reason it's called a wholesale, right, is just the same way that our supply industry, is done, right? I mean, the car industry wholesales, right? You get a dealer, or a manufacturer that sells to a dealer, and they pay X amount, and then they're able to mark it up to retail or manufactured, suggested list price. And then you have it, I mean, with, food suppliers, and you have it with, anything, merchandise, anything, right? Like where you have, a specific, industry that sells to a distributor that has the list of retail buyers, right? Or whatever. And so therefore, there's a spread made based on that specific thing. So, I mean, all a wholesaler is somebody that has a list of end user investor buyers that somebody else may not have, that's specific to this type of product. And then they do the marketing direct to the owner and to get the opportunities. And therefore, they're the in between. They're now the supplier. They get the property at a discount, and then they sell it for, a little bit of a margin, and the end user is still buying it at a discount and still makes money. So
I think the big difference in that. Well, I was going to say the big difference in that analogy is like the person who's wholesaling on the first part, the manufacturer. It's a professional company. They have contracts. They know what they're doing. They're selling to an actual wholesaler in the middle, as opposed to a little old lady in Alabama she hasn't sold a house in 55 years. And the only reason she's selling is because her husband died. It's like, I think, I understand the concept of the economics, but I think the emotional sentiment and when you start getting legislators involved, that's what they're trying to protect.
Well, and that's what happens, because people don't see the legwork, right? I mean, wholesaling is not for everybody, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And we see, companies that have built businesses out of that have done a really good job. We've seen some other companies that don't do the greatest job. But at the end of the day, it's, what has made me a successful wholesaler is my years of experience in this industry, whether, it has to do with having a license and represent buyers and sellers, but also understanding construction, understanding renovations, understanding the buy and, the fix and flip business. So all of that knowledge and all of those years of experience that I have goes into why I've been able to be successful doing it. But you see, the consumer or somebody outside looking in sees a transaction take place, or they know a transaction took place where, their grandmother or something sold a property for $100,000, and then they see it resell, a second time for 120, and then they see the end user get it and renovate it and sell it for, 250.
Right.
And everybody gets their feelings hurt. Everybody gets upset. Everybody's like, hey, you left money on the table. You got taken advantage of.
Right.
And we've talked about this time and time again. Like, in order for like most wholesale transactions or even flip opportunity transactions to take place for me, it's the convenient situation for the seller. The best way I can describe it is, everybody listening to this podcast has traded in a car before. They've all left money on the table. They've all decided that they want to go to a dealer drop their car off, not even vacuum it, and say, what will you offer me for this car? Because I want the convenience to sell this, be done with it, pay off my lien, and buy another vehicle, right? Everybody's done that, and everybody's left money on the table. They know that they could potentially make another couple $1,000s if they sell it on their own, but it's a pain in the butt to do it, right? Or you're going to pay another broker to help you sell it if you do it on consignment or something like that. So we've all been in that situation, and you don't hear anybody complaining about that side of the industry, from that point of view, but because it's convenience, it's become, everybody's gotten accustomed to doing it.
Yeah.
And so when you sell property as is, you're selling it because you want the convenience, right? Yeah. And that's the best way to compare it. But other people, agents, particularly when Open Door became so popular, you had so many agents out there in the industry get upset and just get so irritated with their clients. Like, why would you leave money on the table? You're leaving 10, 15,000, 20,000. I can get you so much more. It's not always about money. It's not always about money.
Quick and easy is worth a lot. So, well, we've gone pretty long today, so we'll revisit this. I think this is going to be something that will really, according to this guy, it's going to happen pretty fast. And so more and more states are going to regulate. We'll see what Texas does. Maybe fortunately for us, Texas only legislates every 2 years. And so it may be a little slower to go here. We don't have professional representatives that are there all the time. And so they only really convene every 2 years unless there's a special session, which I guess they could do. So we will continue to watch that. So if you have not yet, please like, subscribe, share this with someone else. Follow us over on YouTube, where we post our episodes over there as well. And we will be back to you next Friday, and we hope you have a great day.